Welcome to our revision class. We will be reviewing the 9 May 2025 Managerial Economics class. There are about 8 questions in this, all case studies, and you're asked to apply whatever is in there. So case study number 1 is on demand forecasting, the challenge at Zamtropics. So Zamtropics Limited is a medium-sized Zambian food processing company specialized in mango-based juices, dried fruits for both local and export markets. Over the past 3 years, the company has seen fluctuating demand in both domestic and foreign markets, making it increasingly difficult to manage inventory, allocate production resources, and set marketing strategies. To address this challenge, the CEO recently mandated the development of a comprehensive demand forecasting model to inform production planning, pricing strategy, inventory management. However, senior managers across departments have conflicting views about the forecasting method to adopt. Some suggest a traditional statistical approaches, while others lean towards the expert opinion or market surveys. Moreover, the marketing manager insists on that demand forecasting must factor in consumer behavior, price elasticity, changing tastes, especially as some topics prepares to introduce a new premium mango juice brand aimed at health-conscious market. You are a postgraduate intern assigned to assist the senior management in navigating this critical decision. With 5 marks, critically analyze the key factors that some topics should consider when selecting the demand forecasting method for its current and new product lines. But B, as an advisor, explain how different types of demand elasticity, be it price, income, cost, can influence the accuracy and relevance of some topics' demand forecast. And our C, discuss the managerial implications of using consumer interview methods versus statistical trend analysis for forecasting uh, demand in processing industry. Okay, so basically, what are we looking at here? We're looking at the tenets of what? Demand forecasting. What is demand forecasting to start with? And what are the objectives that are embedded in this activity? So let's go through briefly to our notes before we answer this question. So when dealing with demand forecasting, we're looking at a systematic estimation of the future demand for a particular product specified under a certain period of time under set assumptions or conditions. So it enables firms to predict the consumer needs and make informed decisions for production, for marketing and finance. So in managerial economics, it forms a bridge between economic theory and business practice, helping firms to translate data into actionable plans. So the objectives of demand forecasting are number one, for production and planning, it ensures that production capacity matches the market demand and prevents under or overproduction. It is also used for financial planning. It provides a basis for budgeting, for working capital management, and investment planning. Demand forecasting also assists in pricing and promotion strategies and sales target setting. In human resource, it is important because it guides manpower requirements in line with the expected output. Demand forecasting is important for capacity utilization as it ensures efficient use of machinery and resources. It is also important for strategic decision making because it supports long-term planning, such as expansion and diversification, or new product ventures. So these are the objectives of what? Demand forecasting. These are the objectives of demand forecasting. Any questions so far? Are we together? So these are the notes you already have. I just need to expand and make a point before we get to the actual question. So what is the importance of demand forecasting in managerial economics? So the importance of demand forecasting in managerial economics would be in the areas that I mentioned in finance, in marketing, in operations and HR. So decision making heavily relies on the accuracy of the information that we get from the demand forecast because they will influence all the functional areas. Finance because they determine the revenue projections. Marketing to align promotional efforts with the sales volumes. Operations balancing raw material procurement with output goals, and also HR adjust labor force according to projected production needs. So the types of forecasting are based on the following. Number one, time horizon. Number two, the nature of the product. They're also based on the type of demand that is there. So when talking about time, short-term forecasts that cover up to a year, those ones are used for production scheduling, for staffing and inventory management. So medium is 1 to 3 years. This one assists with what? Um, Capacity adjustments and budgeting. And long-term focus for more than 3 years, these ones are there to support decisions such as the market entry, expansions of the plant. The other determinant of demand forecasting would be um, the nature of the product. The nature of the product. So if the product is a consumer or it's an industrial good, that will determine what kind of forecasting method we use. So usually, if we're dealing with consumer goods, it's based on disposable income and preferences and price elasticity. And if we're dealing with industrial goods, it's driven by the demand from the consumer and industrial cycles. And last but not the least, the type of demand that we have. So if we have what we call firm level forecasting, the estimates for demand for a specific product of a company. Then we have industry level forecasting, which estimates the total demand within an industry. And we have national forecasting, which predicts the aggregate demand for an economy. So these are the types of forecasting on which this will rely on. Now, there are factors that will affect demand forecasting. Okay, there are several factors that will affect not demand, but demand forecasting. So demand forecasting will depend on multiple variables. Okay. Number one, the nature of the product. Okay, whether it's a perishable or whether it's non-perishable or durable good. Secondly, look at the product life cycle. Forecasting also will vary between the introduction, the growth, and maturity stage up until the decline stages. It also look at the availability of historical data. How reliable is that data to improve the forecasting? It also look at the type of market. Is it a stable market or a volatile market? Or is it a monopolistic, oligopolistic market? It also look at the competitor actions, whether the price changes of a new product introduction will distort the predictions. It also look at the environment. What is inflation like, economic level, the GDP. It also look at the technological changes. Can they render forecasts absolute by changing the consumer preferences? They also look at the marketing efforts like advertising, sales promotion. Okay, so these are uh, the factors upon which demand heavily demands on. We also need to understand the methods that we use of forecasting. So some of these methods, we actually use them in quantitative methods. Okay, so the method of forecasting that I use, um, number one, we have what we call qualitative methods. What we call qualitative methods. So these qualitative methods or judgment or opinion-based methods use historical data used when historical data is insufficient or unavailable. So we have what we call an expert opinion, where managers will collect insight from experienced executives, the intern himself, consultants, regarding the future demand. Sometimes we have what we call market research or survey, which involves direct consumer interactions. You go into the market and interview the customers based on their opinions and preferences. There's also what we call the DEFI technique. This is a technique method where experts will give independent opinions on multiple rounds and give feedback and refine them. Then last but not the least, we have what we call the consumer interview method, which focuses on consumers' purchase intentions and perceptions. This is useful when you want to estimate the potential market. So you want to say, if we were to bring this, how do you think, would you be interested? Okay. So this is slightly similar but different from um, the the market research method, right? So there are advantages and disadvantages of using this method that we have just mentioned. So advantages are that number one, it is capable of what? Capturing behavioral and attitudinal factors. It is not suitable when you are introducing a new product. It is quick to implement and the short-term planning. The disadvantages is that it is subjective to opinions which are prone to biases. So it's limited sample can misrepresent the entire market. So if people say we'll be, especially if I were to give in dollar, where our city failed to host cinema, so people say we'll be coming, but well, the market could not suit in dollar. All right, so it is also difficult to replicate for consistent results. So this particular region prefers movies, the other region prefers clubbing. So this may not apply to another region. Are we together? We go to the other. So these were qualitative methods. So we go to quantitative methods. So quantitative methods, we have it's the following types that are there. Okay, of regression and econometric models. So quantitative makes use of historical numeric data. Okay, this is quantitative in nature. So we have time series, which includes um, trend analysis, seasonality, cyclical fluctuations, and random variation. So here we use what we call exponential smoothing and moving averages. Then we also have the regression analysis that is used to measure relationships between the independent and dependent. Dependent being demand and independent variables being price, income, and advertising. So the types that we use are simple regression and multiple regression. So these are the quantitative methods that we use when doing our forecasting. Are we together? These are the methods that we use when we're doing our forecasting. So now we also need to understand um, other quantitative methods that we have. We have what we call econometric methods. So econometric methods are those ones to do with uh, barometric and leading indicators. Okay, so we use these ones to predict GDP, consumer spending. So in a nutshell, what have we said? We have looked at the two methods that we use when collecting data. We have what we call the qualitative and quantitative. Under qualitative, there is little historical data that is there. This one requires historical data. Then the nature here is subjective, here it's objective. Then in terms of field work, it's more on qualitative, and here it's moderate. You just use models. Here, yeah, it's ideal for new markets, here for already established markets. And the methods that we use are consumer surveys, here we use regression and moving averages. So this is the difference between the two types of approaches that we have. Okay, so now the criteria for choosing which method has some factors that you need to consider. So what factors are you going to consider? Which method will justify the current scenario? So factors to consider, we call them the key determinants of forecasting method selection. Number one, the availability of data. So when you have historical data, which supports the quantitative methods, we use that. Absence of data, which favors judgmental approaches, that one we use a qualitative. The nature and the PLC stage. So if we're in the mature stage, we use a quantitative. If we are new products, we use our qualitative. Then the focus, horizon. So if it's short term, you use statistical time series. If it's long term, you use a causal and scenario methods. Okay, which is qualitative. Then the purpose, if it's for operation and production purposes, we use simple models. If it's strategic, we use complex models like econometric. So all this could be under quantitative. The cost involved. If you want to balance between the model specification and the available expertise, or if it's overly complex model that do not justify their costs, you must put that factor into consideration. Okay, so now we would also want to know, of course, the other factors that you should look at are the volatility in the market and the managerial skill, whether the markets will require an adaptive dynamic or whether you require the um, a skill of competent people like you who are learning these. So now let's look at the types of elasticities that we have. How many types of elasticities do we know? We have price elasticity of demand. So elasticity basically measures how the market responds to changes in key variables like price, income, and price of related goods like substitutes and complements. So focus will primarily be there to improve um, the forecast accuracy will actually improve significantly when elasticity estimates are integrated into the model. So we have types of elasticity like price elasticity of demand, which shows the percentage change in quantity demanded over price. So if we have more than one, it means demand is elastic. So a small change in price will have a large change in quantity demanded. And we also have inelastic demand, where a small price change will have a minor change in quantity demanded. So the implication here is that for elastic products, you must be careful when it comes to fluctuations in prices. So if you reduce, you know that you're going to have a big demand. If you increase, the demand will increase drastically. All right. Are we together so far? Are we together so far?
Yes, so far so good.
All right. So now let's go to um the other types of elasticity. We have two more types of elasticity. What are they? We talked about them. You should know them.
Income elasticity.
This is income elasticity. Uh-huh. What other elasticity do we have?
Gross.
Mm-hmm. What other elasticity do you know? We talked about the three types of elasticity of demand. We have um, income, we've talked about. We have cross price elasticity. We also have, so those are the three, all right? So we've talked about income elasticity. So what is income elasticity? This is simply um, measures the responsiveness of demand to changes in consumer income. So if we have a positive, it means that is a what? A normal good. If we have a negative, that is what? An inferior good. If you have more than one, that is a luxurious good. So cross price elasticity of demand measures how one product responds to prices of another. So it's a percentage change both demand of good A over percentage change of price in good B. So if you have positive uh, elasticity of cross price elasticity, it means a substitute. If you have a negative cross price elasticity, it means that is a what? A complement. All right. So these are the elasticities that we must know. Now, let's look at the role that elasticity has in forecasting. What role does elasticity have in forecasting? Okay. What role does elasticity have in forecasting? So elasticity is very important because it is used to make marketing decisions, pricing promotions, forecasting sales. So elasticity also is there to help um, in estimations. Okay, so forecasts that ignore elasticity usually have a lot of deviations from the actual outcomes. For new product introductions, so estimated elasticity will guide the pricing, will guide the marketing entry strategies. So focusing is not just about an operational exercise, but it is a strategic tool that must align with the planning strategies. So long-term focus will form basis for corporate strategy like expansion, diversification, like capital budgeting. Forecasting also will help in financial planning. So if you have forecasted demand, it will help you determine the revenue streams, cash flow timing, and investment needs. It is also important for revenue resource allocation. So focus will guide where to allocate those resources. whether it's a marketing or production or research and development, it will help you align that. There are many other roles that elasticity will help. It will help also in sales and operations planning and risk management. How does it help in those avenues? So elasticity would be important in the sales and operations planning. So it's important that it will help integrate the focus across departments to ensure that there's organizational coherence. It will also help in risk management. So scenario focusing will help anticipate and mitigate risk from economic downtowns. It also help in supply disruptions and policy changes. So what are some of the determinants in the food and beverage industry? So in industries that are processing food, determinants of demand will hinge on the macro and micro factors. So number one, the consumer preferences, the taste, the health consciousness, and packaging. Secondly, the income levels. Okay, this will affect the elasticity demand. So the affordability of the product, whether they're luxury or normal goods or inferior goods. The price and substitutes. So competing beverages will also affect the brand loyalty. The seasonal factors. Okay, whether it's a hot season or cold season. The technological changes will also influence what? Demand, whether production is efficient and distribution is efficient. Advertising and promotion. Okay, there's sharp awareness and consumption habits and government policies. All these will affect what? Our demand. So it is important that you know these factors affecting demand. All right. So are we ready to now answer the question paper after talking about all those important issues? So it is also important that you must understand that there's no specific focusing method that is top-notch. So sometimes you have to combine these methods. Collectively, we call them hybrid methods, where you combine a bit of this and a bit of that to come up with something more refined. So hybrid is a method where we integrate both quantitative and qualitative methods to have a rigor and more effective approach. So examples is when you're using consumer surveys to adopt new preferences, when you combine them with time series for established trends and apply some regression to test causality. So this will reduce the limitations that are there in each. And also continuous feedback. You focus must be dynamic, regularly revise them using actual data, and market intelligence will enhance what? Accuracy. So what are some of the limitations of these focusing models? Uncertainty. Sometimes due to economic and environmental unpredictability, you have uncertainty. Sometimes data unavailability, so you have inaccurate or insufficient data to distort your projections. Sometimes the biases in judgment, so human errors, okay, and technological disruptions may also make past data outdated, and also unexpected competitor action where you have a sudden price war. Those ones will affect. So what have we said so far? What have we said so far? We have said that demand forecasting is about what? Predicting and planning, making decisions that will predict the future. The approaches that we looked at are what? Qualitative, which looks at opinions, and quantitative. And the method of selection depends on the availability of data, the cost, the purpose, and the product type. And also the role that elasticity makes that it integrates what? Responsiveness of demand to pricing, to income, to competition. And the alignment with strategy, focusing will inform long-term strategy and resource distribution. And we said the hybrid method is one that measures the two. And in terms of relevance in the industry, it is vital in a dynamic world where consumer demands are changing for products like beverages. So now we go back to our exam question that came last year. We want to look at the case study that came last year.
Good. I'll proceed with this.
So Having explained the entire process of demand, we'll read through the question here again. So Zamtropics is a medium Zambian based company in food processing, specialized in mango juices and dried fruits. Over the years, the company has seen fluctuating demand, both demand in domestic and foreign markets, and making it difficult to manage inventory and allocate resources to set marketing budgets. To address this, the CEO recently was mandated with developing a comprehensive demand forecasting model to inform production planning, pricing, inventory, and management. However, senior managers across department have conflicting views with forecasting model to adopt. Others are suggesting traditional, others want expert opinion. Moreover, the marketing manager insists that demand forecasting must factor in consumer behavior, price elasticity, and the changing tastes, especially that Zamtropics is wanting to prepare or introduce a new premium product of mango juice for those that are health conscious. So you are a postgraduate and have been invited to assist the senior management. So critically analyze the key factors that Zamtropics should consider when selecting a forecasting method. So part A, what factors must be considered? And part B, we've talked about everything in here already. As an advisor, explain the different types of elasticity, income, price, and cost per side, and how they could influence the accuracy and relevance of the demand forecast. And also discuss the managerial implications of consumer interview versus the trend analysis. Okay, so we've talked about all these in the few minutes we were just discussing. So let's just go to a pamphlet quickly. Those that have the pamphlet can go on page 15. We look at the pamphlet has notes, simplified notes that will help you just understand every concept of what we are discussing here. So part A, the key factors that are embedded in us selecting an appropriate demand for forecast. So it must consider the availability of data, the nature of the product, the forecast horizon in terms of time, the cost, and market availability. So when selecting um, the model, since we're looking at an established juice that is already there, so you can use what? Quantitative methods like exponential smoothing. But we want to introduce a new product, which is mango juice. So we lack what? Historical data. So here we're going to integrate what? The qualitative approach to looking at the consumer opinion. So a hybrid will then be appropriate in this regard. Okay. So you combine both of them. So the quantitative, you use exponential smoothing. The qualitative, you use consumer approaches like expert judgment and testing the market. Okay, the second part of the question uh, was asking us to, as an advisor, explain the different types of elasticity. He has even given you the leakage there and how they will influence the accuracy of demand forecast. Okay, so the types of elasticities, we have what? The income, we have the prices of demand, we also have the cross price. So these ones will affect how the forecast will adjust to market changes. Now, ignoring elasticity will lead to uh, static forecasts. So when you incorporate these ones, they'll enable conditions answering the question, what if? Okay, to account for price adjustment, to account for income variations, to account for competitor actions. So to improve decision making in a nutshell. So how will it influence the focus and accuracy? So in that way. Okay, so you read more over the section. So I've sent you the notes of what we have talked about in a nutshell. And part C reads, discuss the managerial implications of using consumer interview methods versus the trend analysis for forecasting in the food processing industry. Discuss the implications of using consumer interview methods versus statistical trend analysis for demand forecasting in the food processing industry. So we discussed what consumer interviews are all about. So consumer interviews usually uncover why consumers behave the way they do. So it is usually used when you're dealing with new products. where a statistical trend is there to identify how much demand will fluctuate based on the data. So Zamtrophics in this case should integrate both. They should use the statistical analysis for established lines and also consumer interviews for these new product lines. So both will be appropriate. Okay. So the question is based on which we discuss the managerial implications of using consumer interview methods versus statistical. So what are the implications? So the consumer interviews will uncover why consumers behave the way they do. It is usually important for new products, whereas the other one will look at how much demand